We have two very special guests here today because there's a couple of history that I want to share before we get into today's talk. Tuan and Luc just actually celebrated their 10 years of doing business together. Isn't that incredible? 10 years. And Tuan moved around to Vietnam at the same time, Luc a little bit before that. And they actually discovered each other through Tuan's first business called Work Saigon, which was by most measures the first co-working space in Vietnam. It's now closed, but he's gone on to do many other types of businesses. And then Luc, he's run at a C-level position, life insurance companies, global ones, including one today, Sun Life, a Canadian. And actually, I discovered about their collaborative project, Work Saigon, which actually expanded, if I recall correctly, through reading online. So before I even moved here, I was like, oh my God, Tuan's like a rock star, you know, like he's killing it. How do I know what he's doing? How do I get in touch with the guy? Ended up doing some things with him actually business-wise and just a friendship over the long term as well. So without further ado, that's the kind of history. Luc, first question to you. You look very young, by the way.
I am young.
I was supposed to say you're like 30, but you're probably older than that because you've had like 3 CEO positions in your career already. If you stayed in Canada, where you're from, Montreal, where would you see yourself now?
Yeah, I think had I stayed in Canada, I stayed in Canada to my early 30s before moving back to Vietnam, and I was starting at the management level. I'm an actuary by formation, and I was starting to be a manager level. So had I stayed, I probably would have continued working for one of the big life insurance company in Canada, moving up the ranks slowly. Probably doing a very technical job right now. I think that's how I would see it had I stayed.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously today, not only are you a CEO, but you've had a bit of a space to experiment. I mean, tell us about how you discovered what Tuan was doing 10 plus years ago, and why did you even do it in the first place?
So when I first came back to Vietnam, just, building a life insurance company in Vietnam. So very technical job. I was a chief actuary, CFO. And at some point when the company was starting to be strong, we wanted to do something different. And then that's when we saw what Tuan was doing with Work Saigon. And then we start thinking, how can we integrate that into a very financial industry? And then we started creating this lounge. It was called Nest, where we would create customer and organizing events there. And that was 10 years ago. And now what we've done is what we call the La Salle Sun Life flagship on Pasteur Street. So it's also a coffee shop and event space, but now we took it one step further, is creating an art space. So every month we have an exhibition there, and we showcase different art form, different Vietnamese artists. So that's what we've been able to do in Vietnam. I think had I stayed in Canada, I would have done my technical role, but I wouldn't have the opportunity to do all these things. And we also have a space on Nguyễn Văn Cử. It has a very big screen. It used to be an old warehouse, very big screen. So one Friday per month, we will show a movie open to the public. We'll show artsy movie, independent movie, and we'll invite the film director to come, have a talk. So those are the things that we're able to do in Vietnam. I'm so grateful that I can do that in Vietnam.
These spaces are very impressive, by the way. Check them out. For those of you joining the company tour, you'll see one of them tomorrow. De La Salle, Pasteur Street, and the one on Nguyen Van Gu, right? Check those out. Tuan, you had the pleasure of designing a few of these experimental kind of physical omni-channel spaces.
Yeah.
And I remember the story when you first got the email, I think, or Facebook message from Luc. You were like, "Oh, this is a scam," or "This is spam. I can't believe this."
He didn't respond. He didn't respond.
What went through your mind when you first got that opportunity as a new entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think like most of you, if you get a message from somebody who says they're from the life insurance industry, you immediately click spam. And this guy was like the CEO of a life insurance company. So it just went to spam, and I think it went on for several weeks. And then I got a phone call from their assistant. It's like, "Oh, I'm calling on behalf of the CEO of blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, And then I think a week or two later, you guys actually showed up at the space. Luke, and at the time was the CFO, and the CEO at the time. They showed up at the space, they introduced themselves, we got a coffee. I listened to their vision. And then 2 weeks later, I came back with a proposal. And
Wow.
we just started from there. Yeah.
And keep in mind, he was almost broke, I think, at the time, too.
Yeah, I was broke.
You
Not
were
almost.
broke. He was living upstairs.
Yeah.
It was dire moments. And today, I mean, the Lab Saigon, if you don't know who they are, a creative agency, they also specialize in F&B operation. Really fantastic stuff. Go search it online. Moving ahead, I want to ask about your business, Tuan, because Work Saigon, which no longer exists, but you obviously have a lot of experience in co-working. How innovative was it really at the time? Because a lot of OVers would ask me, like, you know, is there like massive tech innovation going on, building AI technologies, or is it just like kind of bringing something that hasn't been done well or not at all even to Vietnam, like co-working at the time? What went through your head when you were doing this thing? Is it like breaking ground or like building something really innovative?
So I just want to give some context to the audience. So if you have any follow-up questions, it'll be specific. So I moved back to Vietnam in 2013 from Dubai. I was working there in marketing and advertising at a company called TBWA. So at that time, what was going through my head was I was kind of sick of the corporate world. So I actually started from the corporate world. I actually got an offer when I decided to quit to either go to their corporate office in Tokyo or Toronto. So had I taken that route, I would have been like, you know, like at his seat, maybe, you know, in advertising. But I actually just wanted to leave that world behind, so I moved back to Vietnam. It was the second co-working space in Vietnam, but the first co-working space that included a cafe. So that was where the innovation came from.
Okay, the cafe part. So everyone
Now
has
it's
a
like,
dream of
duh,
opening a cafe. Do you recommend opening a cafe?
No, definitely not. Yeah,
okay.
it was not innovative at now, but it was then.
Okay, and just a very quick follow-up question. You probably like made no money at all for a while.
Thank
like,
you. You keep reminding me. Yes.
He's very well-to-do today, I think, just based on his style. But tell us about what was it like just going through that? Because a lot of OVers here, they're enjoying, you know, really great work environments wherever they might be from, or even here in Vietnam. And there's always this fear of like, oh, I'm going to lose my salary. And then I tell people, like, you actually don't have anything to lose. You only have something to gain. So it's actually fear holding you back. How did you overcome that?
At that time, I think, like most of you, I was a white-collar professional. I was quite confident in my ability. So I felt if I had failed this adventure, I could easily rejoin a company. How much do you think I brought back to Vietnam to start my business? Just like random guess.
10K? 20K?
No.
What
is it? Okay. $500? Oh, jeez. Huh? 100,000? No. Okay. 45,000. So it wasn't even that much money to lose. You know, if you're a young professional, you can make that back minus your cost of living, maybe 2 years, right? So yeah. So I just took a leap.
Cool. Okay. Luke, over to you. If I recall, you know, these life insurance companies, while the concept in the industry is relatively new, if I recall, penetration of life insurance in Vietnam is single digits. So it's a huge market. By the way, for Western countries, I think it's like 50, 60%, something like that. Even
90.
more. 90. So a long way to go in terms of life insurance penetration in Vietnam. And I imagine a lot of the people working at these companies could bring a lot of legacy with them, or, you know, maybe they didn't have the right leadership in the past. What were your first feelings jumping into that corporate Vietnamese environment 10, 15 years ago?
It was a huge difference between what I've known in Canada, working in Canada, and when I first came back to Vietnam. So I think it took me about 6 months to get used to it. I think the first 6 months are very, very difficult. Like I'm fairly determined, but I gotta tell you, like those first 6 months were really, really tough. But once you get past the first 6 months and around the 12 months mark, that's when I start feeling very comfortable and starting thinking about how I can contribute and not just follow, but then contribute. So I think for me, a big shift was around the 12 month mark where I can start thinking about what to do and take it to a new direction. Yeah.
For anyone that knows Nest or any of these other like De La Soul, it's really different. It's really surprising, actually. Like the first thing in my head is like, wow, Luc, you got budget approval for this? This is amazing. Like,
well, I was a CFO.
Oh, true. Oh,
so that makes
helps.
it easy.
But like, a lot of people think like, are Vietnamese management even open to these ideas?
Yeah.
Were you lucky?
I think it's just the way that you present it, right? So we're all in Ho Chi Minh now. So just think about when you have a billboard, especially around the Ben Thanh market. So as a big corporate, it's very normal to have a billboard around the Ben Thanh market. But you know how much it costs to have a billboard at the Ben Thanh market every month? It's very costly. But just think about, we are putting a billboard there, hoping that someone on the motorbike or in their car will look up and see our brand and remember our brand. But there's no connection, right? So instead of doing that, you take that budget and you create an art space. You organize an exhibition every month with Vietnamese artists. You're helping arts and culture. You're helping these young talent. And the people are coming intentionally to go to your space and have a connection with your brand. So for the same amount of money, budget, you have a very different connection with the people in Vietnam. So I think that's how I present it.
So Luc, I'm going to introduce you to my CFO.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's out there, probably. And you're going to have a chat with her.
I just want to
have a sip.
I
Okay.
just want to add to Luc's point is like, you built that billboard, but you're not running these exhibitions yourself as Sun Life, right? These communities, they self-organize, they come and they say, hey, we have this great idea for an art project. Can we do it at your space? So you create the facility, but people are actually taking on the operation burden, So it's not like you actually have to do it every single month. Yeah.
Very cool. This is for both of you. How can OVers, or just anyone from outside, even someone that's returning to Vietnam, leverage networks to support their businesses here and careers? Is it just like LinkedIn OV? Okay, that's one. That didn't exist, obviously, when you guys were first arriving. What did you do to kind of meet the right people? Was it just timing or creating spaces where people can come together? What was that like?
I think all of that, for sure. And I think one that maybe is like a little bit more hard to pinpoint is that a lot of times you come back here, you do your business or you work at a big company, but you don't speak the language, the local language, you get very lonely. So I think one part of the OV's network is actually to provide like emotional companionship, so you can actually focus on your work. So you came here quite alone, right? We grab a few beers, we grab a few coffee, and I think that for me is value in the community too, that people often overlook. And then there's mentorship. I go to dinner with Luc from time to time, coffee, and from there I get mentorship. Hey, I have this issue at work. What would you do in my position? I just called you last week about something. So I think those are the two things I try to tap into: emotional support, and then also mentorship outside of the networking opportunities.
And Luc, for you?
For me, actually, I've learned it from you. So I came to Vietnam before you, right?
Yes,
But when we met, I think you told me one thing because we didn't know each other. And then Hao said, I think he met Tuan and he asked Tuan if I were to meet, I'm new here, if I were to meet 3 people, who should I meet? And I think Tuan proposed my name as one of the 3.
Yes,
and then
yeah.
that's how we met.
Yes. Yeah.
So I thought that was very, very, very good because if you say that to me, then I feel, okay, I'll meet you because if I'm being proposed,
That's
then,
true.
you feel value, right? So then that's how I would say yes and meet you. So I moved to to Myanmar in 2019 to start a company there. And I didn't know anyone. When I landed, I only knew one person. And I used the same technique that Hao talked to me about. So I went there and I said the same thing. Once I meet someone, I was like, oh, can you introduce me to 3 people that I should meet? And then that's how I do. And I will go out and meet people every night for the first 6 months I was in Myanmar. And for people that know me, I'm very private. I don't go out and stuff. So I really did it, and it really worked for me in Myanmar. So I think
Amazing.
that would be my advice, following your advice.
Yeah, no, that's really well done. There's a couple faces in the crowd too that I've met by asking this question basically. Not 3 people, but 7 years ago when I was writing, and I still do on Vietcetera, I would interview somebody. I would ask them, hey, based on our theme of bringing Vietnam to the world or doing something special for Vietnam, who should I meet that also represents that? And I've met a few people. One is Shark Min Beta. I saw you walk in a little bit late. Oh, there he is. Everyone, Min Beta, who's speaking a little bit, very good friend. And I met him through that simple tactic. And watching his company grow, himself grow, and now he's on Shark Tank as well. It's just amazing to see. So really great to share that to the audience. Thank you, Luc. Just a couple of other questions, everyone. One is a controversial one. I have opinions about that, but I'd like to hear from you guys. So both. A lot of people think it's easier to be an entrepreneur or CEO in Vietnam than where you're from, Canada, US. And it seems to be a question that comes up a lot, especially for those that have never actually worked here. What do you have to say about that? So Luc and then
So for me, I think there's pros and cons in both markets. I think in Canada, the skill level will be high. So I think if you were a CEO, you may not need to go to the same level of detail that I'm going into right now. But I think the pace of Vietnam allows you to go much, much faster. And you can do so much more in Vietnam. So for me, I think the difference would be probably it will be more stable had I stayed in Canada in terms of the role. But I think in Vietnam, I think there's more faster pace. But you got to put so much more energy into it to make it happen. But it's fast and you can do a lot. So I think for me,
cool.
Yeah.
And Tuan.
Yeah, I think for entrepreneurship, like I run an SME, so entrepreneurship at this level, I think it's easier to make mistakes in Vietnam for sure, and then move on past that mistake and then try and do something else. I think where most of my clients run into trouble when trying to start their own business in Vietnam is actually on people. So trying to manage people, trying to recruit people, inspire people. Like for example, a month ago we had a client that was launching a Japanese project, a Japanese brand. It was quite a simple project. Anybody else would have done it in 3 to 4 months, but his took 9 months to do. And I think his mistake was that he thinks if he just threw money at people, they would be on his team. But instead he forgets he still has to inspire people, he still has to lead them. People are not just working for money here because they have a lot of opportunities. So you still do need to come back, inspire them with a vision, set growth paths, career paths, and not just think, oh, I'm going to pay this guy cheaper and then hire him. So I think just be careful of that mindset.
Okay. Yeah, we could do a whole podcast for hours about that, but thank you for those little tidbits. And if you do have questions, I'll invite them later. We'll do a quick Q&A, sure, for the lady in the front here in the pink. We'll just have one question. We need to move along, everyone. But of course, we have networking sessions during lunch and whatnot.
Thank you very much for this. We didn't see it, and it's also a question maybe for Quang. We didn't see a markup of the OV members according either there are genuine VietQs, meaning first, second, third generations of refugees or immigrants, and the overseas Vietnamese who studied abroad,
right,
who are Vietnamese and studied abroad and come back or had positions abroad and come back. I think the needs are maybe different, and also the choice between corporate CEO and startup may be different according to this markup. I don't know. It's a question. And my question regarding this remark is, I think that corporate CEOs have been recruited when they were VietQs for 2 assets because of their network, and maybe also, and not exclusively, but maybe also because of their ethical and integrity, not being, bribed, possibly to be bribed or whatever. But what I've noticed from the overseas Vietnamese studying and coming back is really among all the Vietnamese is the need to be entrepreneurs. the entrepreneurship mindset is much stronger among the younger generations than it was, from my generation, for example. So I don't know. So my question is, do you see a difference between the VetQs and the overseas Vietnamese studied abroad and coming back?
Maybe, Tuan, you want to answer that? Or?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know how you would qualify me. I was born in Da Nang, Vietnam, and then I moved to LA, and then I came back in 2010. I left again, and then I moved back again. I see a huge difference working with somebody like Luc at a position, senior position, on the client side versus, let's say, a local person. And I'm not sure it's about bribery or integrity or anything like that. I think it's more management style, and that I see the biggest difference in. Whereas I can go meet Luc and have a conversation about the project. I feel there's quite a gap between me and a local CEO. Maybe because I'm a VQ myself, but they would never have coffee with me or lunch with me or dinner with me and talk about a project. It's always in a meeting room with 4 or 5 of their lieutenants. So I think, for me, I see management style difference. Not so much integrity, because I haven't tried to bribe them.
Yeah. That's a separate conversation. But yes, I think we brought it up twice.
I don't bribe anybody.
We'll skip that. Okay, so last question, and we'll wrap up this panel. You both worked together for 10 plus years. Where will the next 10 take this particular business relationship, you think, given the growth of Vietnam? Have you even talked about that? So here you go.
So, I mean, we talked about the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And we said, he said something that I didn't really agree with. He said that the difference between you and me for the last 10 years is everything you built belongs to you. Everything I built belongs to a corporation in another country. I didn't really believe that because I felt everything he's built is attached to his name and his career profile. Whereas everything I've built might come crumbling down the next day because it's an SME, right? So let's talk about the last 10 years and then we'll move to the next 10 years. What do you think about the last 10 years?
I think for me, and I said it many times, I think when I started meeting Tuan, so it's all about meeting the right people. I think it took my career to a whole different level. Like before that, I was your typical CFO. And I think once I met Tuan, I was able to integrate maybe a real part of me into what I do. And then I think it shows something very real into the business world, which you would think it would not work. But actually, when you put your real self into your role and you create something that's true, that when it becomes real and it works. And so for me, the last 10 years, it has allowed me, after meeting Tuan, to go to a whole different level. And looking back, I think we've done things that we would have not even dreamed of being able to do, creating an art space, creating a lounge. We did a music video together for a band. So a lot of things that a CFO would not think or a CEO would not think we'd be doing. So for me, looking forward to the next 10 years, and as I look at the amount of time I have left in my career, the time becomes very precious. So now I'm going all in. We're going to do all the things that are meaningful and that's going to make an impact to our life, to Vietnam. So that's the goal for the next 10 years.
I just want to say he looks so excited.
Yeah.
So round of applause, everyone.
Next 10 years,
Yeah.
next year, I think it will be quite fluid in terms of the role. For example, I envision our SME to grow into hopefully a big corporate. Right now, we're at 200 staff, and I'm looking to move across Vietnam, not just Saigon. So we are hoping to grow big into a corporate structure. And then for Luc, he has so many opportunities to do investments in entrepreneurship, right? We could do so many things together if it weren't for conflicts of interest. But
Third time already.
So next 10 years, I might be in Luc's chair and Luc might do entrepreneurship.
That's very true.
Very cool, very cool. So I look forward to seeing your guys' journey over the next years as someone next to you in the community. So thank you so much for sharing today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah.
Thank you
very much.
guys. Thank you.